Hello and welcome to the Information Command Center, St. Lucia response to COVID-19. And as it has become the norm on a Sunday evening, we have also an exciting panel. We're continuing the discussion. The focus is on investment and business opportunities. Part 2 of that discussion, we're zeroing in on youth economic empowerment. St. Lucia continues to chart the way forward with a focus on economic recovery, and we zoom in on the opportunities that exist to enable youth economic empowerment and how COVID-19 has given rise to new modes of doing business. We'll be hearing from the government agency responsible for creating the enabling environment, the education sector to discuss how programs have adapted to align with the new economic realities, and a young investor who is tapping into the systems. I am Lissa Joseph. Thank you so much for joining us. And that includes Dave Headley, who is the project coordinator, St. Lucia Business Incubator at Invest St. Lucia. Sunita Denell, the chief executive officer of Export St. Lucia. Denell Florius, who is the co-founder and CEO of Green Energy Services Company. You know it best as EcoCarib. And of course, Dr. Keith Nurse, who is the principal of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, joining us via Zoom. Good evening, thank you all, and welcome. Well, the world currently has the largest young population ever. The United Nations World Population Prospects estimates that in 2020, there will be 1.2 billion young people worldwide. Most of these young people are located in Asia with 60% and in Africa 21%. And these numbers will only continue to grow by 2030. Against this demographic background, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, highlights that there are currently 63 million unemployed young people worldwide, while 40 million additional people, mostly youth, enter the workforce every year. Unemployment no longer guarantees a way out of poverty. 141 million young people worldwide are part of the working poor. Youth unemployment and sustainable decent job creation is an issue that is high on the agenda and reflected notably in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is on decent work and economic growth. What is our St. Lucian context? Unemployment is at 16.8%. That's for 2019, and that's down from over the last 5 years, which was at 24.1%. Youth unemployment in St. Lucia is now at 31.6%. That's down over the last 5 years from 41.0%. So youth unemployment and the lack of opportunities has significant social repercussions and can prevent young people from fully enjoying their rights. Beyond the individual level, it affects the prosperity, stability, and equality within a society and a country's sustainable development. That forms the background of our discussion here when we're looking at the opportunities that exist for our youth, our young entrepreneurs, as we move forward, pressing ahead with the economic empowerment. I want to start with the young entrepreneur in the room. So if the other panelists would indulge a bit and let us get the experience of a young person who has been very bold and taking on head-on the challenges of the business world. Thank you so much, Denell. Tell us about how did you come up with the idea for EcoCarib?
All right, it was a really, really interesting story. EcoCarib came about when I took a ride in an electric car. Now, I started my business career working in the engineering construction industry, and we were responsible for pretty much blowing up mountains, making roads. So we dealt with a lot of dirty diesel. And so that's a lot of fossil fuel you have to deal with every single day. And when I found out about electric vehicles coming to St. Lucia, I was really excited about it for some reason. I didn't know why at first, but then I reached out to the people who were doing it, and I was one of the first people to actually get a ride in an electric car. And that really changed my mindset. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't deal with dirty mechanics, dirty diesel mechanics. This is the future. I can control my car from my laptop. I don't have to deal with oil. I don't have to deal with dirty fuel. My shit stays clean. So that really, really opened my eyes to see where the industry is really going and the promise of a budding industry that has great, great impacts on not just small island developing states, but the entire world. So it really interested me to go into the clean and green technology sectors to make a difference.
For you, interested in knowing, once you decided you had that idea, did you have any idea how to get that idea started?
Interesting question. When I came up with the idea for EcoCarib, a lot of people don't know this, but EcoCarib actually started off as a magazine. So all we wanted to do was just to inform people in the Caribbean about what's going on in this industry. Because like I said, it was a new industry. Nobody knew about green technology. Nobody knew about renewable energy. Nobody knew about electric vehicles. So we wanted to be the one-stop place that people can actually come and get that type of information. After a conversation with Reno Kajada, he said that we need to be more involved in the space. And he recommended that actually we start an engineering firm that can actually do the installation, development, and maintenance of renewable energy technologies and electric vehicles. So that really changed my perspective on it, and we started. So the thing about it is that, it was difficult. We didn't know, we had no experience. I actually wasn't fortunate enough to go all the way to the university level to study it because there were no degrees on it. It was so new. So I was like, okay, where can I learn? So I asked my father to buy me a laptop, internet connection, Google. So I researched every single thing that I could find in the industry. So I remember I used to have to sneak into government meetings because I wasn't an industry expert, quote unquote. But who wasn't back in those days? Nobody knew much about the industry. So I would research by night and by day sneak into meetings. So at first when they tell me, okay, who are you? I would be like, listen, I'm a renewable energy specialist, quote unquote. All right, so I said, I'm presenting who I'm going to be. All right, so at first they were like, okay, who is this kid? I was like, 22 years old at the time. So you're looking like, who is this young guy like coming into the room saying he's a renewable energy specialist? And we have guys with PhDs sitting in the room and they're watching me like, right? So that, I didn't let that stop me. I kept going. So I kept going to the meetings. Eventually they started to learn my name. All right, so they're like, oh yeah, that's Denell. So I was like, okay, that's good. That's a good sign. All right, so now I'm getting recognized. So I kept doing it, I kept going at it, kept researching, kept networking, which is a critical piece of it because people have to know who you are if you want to get their help. So I went out, started networking with people, getting the support that I needed to actually build something. So I built my MVP, which is your minimal viable product, and this is the simplest version of what you offer to the marketplace. And I worked part-time with a company at the time called Vibe Electric, which was one of the first green tech startups in the island. So by day, I would do sales for them and technical work. And by night, I would build EcoCarib online. So I used to do a lot of the programming, a lot of the coding myself at first, just to get that MVP underway and to get it known on the internet. So that really was how we really started with that. And then our first clients was actually Vibe Electric because they needed us to do something that they weren't doing. Because I specifically built the model to fit a gap that I realized that they weren't offering to the marketplace. So that brought in the first amount of revenue, and then we worked from there. So we just started to double our revenue based on that initial offering.
I see Denell there provided so much background and actually contextualized how this conversation is going to move forward, making some very important points. So I want to go across to Dr. Keith Nurse, who is the principal of the South Louis Community College. Dr. Nurse, joining us via
Hi.
Zoom.
How are you
Wonderful.
doing?
Hi, good evening there. So you heard Denell's story, and I'm sure that for you it perhaps mirrors quite a few others that you may have heard during your professional life, and you bring a lot to the table from your professional life. When you hear Denell speak about not having the sort of educational background for him to have pursued the career that he is pursuing right now, are you at all sorts of feeling that the education system, not just in St. Lucia but in the region, is falling short and somehow failing our young persons in helping them to find career paths that are unconventional?
Well, simple answer is yes. Our educational sector, are you still there? Okay. Yeah, our educational sector across the region tends to be very conventional, and what I call rear view, looking in the rear view mirror. So we're training people for professions that have already passed. It's not through the windscreen, looking in front, forward looking. And that's because the sector tends to be very monopoly oriented, particularly in the Caribbean. We have small countries where we have one or two tertiary institutions dominating the landscape. And so because it's uncompetitive, we don't have to win markets. We don't have to be risk-taking. We don't have to be innovative. But I could say at the college in the last few months, we have flipped the script. And that our new academic year going forward, we are going to be offering a number of new and exciting programs that are in keeping with what Denell described. So let me give you an example. We already know, and based on a lot of the research that I've done and others have done, that the growth economies or the great growth elements in the global economy are in green technologies and clean technologies, as he described, renewables, but also the blue economy, which is a critical area for St. Lucia and many other small island developing states, the digital economy, which I'm doing a lot of work on. In fact, I just finished a paper for the World Trade Organization looking at the digital and creative economy. Other growth areas relate to the health sector and also education. Education sector is growing at a rapid rate, and digital education is going to be a huge growth spurt coming after COVID. But just let me make one last point. In a context where you have a global economic depression or recession, this sector that Denell has moved into, renewable energy, has the potential to generate what we call foreign exchange savings by doing import replacement. And if you look at St. Lucia's import bill, the import of fossil fuels is the biggest source of imports. So if you could shave off 5%, 10% of that, maybe even 25% of that in the next 5 years or more, then you start to redirect those resources to local employment and local growth and potentially even exports. That's where the growth is going to take place for countries like St. Lucia and many other countries in the Caribbean. So I'll end my comments at that for now. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Ness, thank you so much for that. And don't feel shy to chime in at any point. And we want to go across to David Headley, who is Dave Headley, who is the project coordinator for St. Lucia Business Incubator over at Invest St. Lucia. When you hear Denell's story, these are the sort of people that the incubator, business incubator at Invest St. Lucia is targeting. So what exactly is the incubator and what is the goal of the incubator?
Okay, again, thanks for having me. For the viewing audience who might not be sure as to what a business incubator is, business incubator is really an organization or company set up to really provide support services for young entrepreneurs or existing businesses. The goal of the business incubator that we're working towards is really to provide that innovative culture and to provide these necessary support services for entrepreneurs, existing businesses that will really propel them and of course give them even a greater chance to more success. And of course later on we'll touch on some of those services that would really propel them and push them to grow. But the overall goal is really to, like I said, to really establish that innovative culture. The research has shown that St. Lucia is known for its entrepreneurship culture. But if you hear the cries, and I'm sure that will agree with me that there is need for greater support in terms of a number of services that would really position young entrepreneurs and even potential persons who want to get to maybe start a business to really give them a chance to grow and set up to be successful.
Let's take a look to Sunita Denell, the CEO there for Invest for Export, St. Lucia. Sunita, the last conversation we had, you indicated that there has not necessarily been a let-up on the interest of the business people to keep pressing on, because that's what business people do in the time of crisis. You find new opportunities. But for young persons specifically, looking at that niche there for Export St. Lucia, what has been the sort of feedback that you've gotten from your young clients?
Thank you, Lissa. Actually, the feedback from our young clients, even during this period, has been tremendous. Even those persons who are not registered with us, who are not our clients, have been coming into our offices, showing some interest in starting up businesses at this time. I think normally what you think about is during times, for example, of COVID or times of difficulty, people ultimately try to look for more stable employment afterwards. And more stable employment normally refers to working for somebody else. We've not really seen that in our case. We've had a lot of young persons coming in, calling us, sending a lot of inquiries through our digital platforms, asking us about how they could probably start up a business and how they could export their service. What we have done is to send a lot more persons, redirect them through to SEDU, which is the Small Business Development Center. Because the government of St. Lucia does operate within an ecosystem. You normally have to go through stages to be able to get the kind of support that you require. So normally persons who want to start up a business would go first to SEDU, and then afterwards they come to Export St. Lucia when they're ready to take that product a little further. So we've had a lot of interest in particular for particular things that Export St. Lucia is working on. A lot of persons have asked us about agricultural opportunities, opportunities in CMOS, a lot of interest coming in that area. So we've seen quite a bit of interest from the youth in as to how they should go about accessing our services and other governmental services to be able to begin a business at this stage, but also to grow their businesses.
So Denell, for you, when you had your plan together, what was your first stop in terms of a government agency? Did you even look the way of the government agency for help? So talk to us about how you were able to inject a life into your plan.
Okay, I mean, SEDU really helped me out a lot, giving the support that they had at the time to really try to help me to grow this business as much as possible. When I outgrew them though, there was a gap in the market, so I could not get the support locally. So this is where I had to use my savings and travel a lot. So I went to Trinidad quite a bit. I went to Jamaica quite a bit just to get access to the opportunities. There were also a lot of opportunities online, which was sponsored by the World Bank, which we took part in, just to help us develop our business model, refine what we were doing, and really get open access to investors and potential partners that we can work with to really help grow our business.
Over at Invest St. Lucia, we alluded to some of the services that are available for young entrepreneur like Denell coming through Invest St. Lucia. How would they even begin to know that Invest St. Lucia is an option for them?
Well, Invest in Lucia works with both, as you would know, both foreign and local investors. Once there is interest, of course, the entrepreneur, the business person would have to come in with their proposal. And based on what they're looking at or what they're interested in, we'll have some dialogue. And of course, if there is opportunity for collaboration, whether it is an issue where they might need factory space, if there are any additional opportunities where you engage persons in the local market, of course you would get that help. But I think what you are alluding to is in terms of the business support services that the incubator will provide. With regards to that, a lot of research and of course engagements have been done not only from a number of other key agencies within the ecosystem, but as well as engagements with just a lot of entrepreneurs from a number of various sectors within St. Lucia. And like you rightly said, starting off, you really want that guidance and support. And like anything else, and I think Denell pointed it out, he tapped into his savings. Anybody starting off at that point, you find they might not have the financial resources. They need some kind of management training. They need that marketing support. They need HR advice. You would want to develop a marketing plan to get persons in the market to know about whatever products or services you're offering. And so when we talk about the business incubator and providing that support, these are some of the services that we're referring to.
Wonderful. Dr. Nurse, we wondered on the educational end of things, how do you begin to devise a plan looking at what the educational needs of students or young persons would be, or society, because they also continue learning there, vis-a-vis what exactly is the market dictating? So how do you now begin to craft that education plan in order to meet what you think the market dictates would be?
Okay, well, let me put it this way. What we know about the educational process in the current context is that we need to move away from teaching to a focus on learning. So we're really flipping away from an old paradigm where the focus was on what the teacher did or the lecturer and what they have to offer, as opposed to what are the learning requirements of the students. So it's a more student-centered focus. That's happening in universities and tertiary institutions across the world. And so we've begun to adopt a similar approach. And by doing so, what we mean is that we are focusing on what are the areas of growth and increasing demand. So a significant share of our courses for the next academic year and going forward are focused on sustainable development issues. So we have sustainable development and climate change related programming across several spheres. In fact, we have a whole new program of offering called Gateways to Global Careers, which are associate degrees, so they're 2 years. They all have both internships and incubators embedded in the 2-year process. So the students are no longer just in the classroom, they operate outside of the classroom and will be interfacing with entrepreneurs in their various fields and so forth. What that does is to catalyze the learning process. So now students are not just learning to pass an exam, they're learning so that they would be better prepared to participate in an internship experience or to be involved in an incubator experience where they are driving the process. Now we are sweetening the pot, as we put it. So for example, the incubator will be based on a design competition, and the top projects will win prizes. Prizes including possibly cash, but also more importantly, business support services. So if there are projects that are viable for the business environment, we would help to facilitate that through business coaching, working with an Invest in Lucia and other institutions to probably take those projects.
Okay, we seem to have temporarily lost Dr. Nurse there. Hope that we make contact with him shortly. But let me go across over to Sunita. Sunita, when your young people come to you, and of course they've gone through the processes, and it means now that they're ready for them to begin to ship out, if you will. Right. What do you think what do you have to work with most with these young entrepreneurs? To give us an idea as to, in terms of whether it may be that perhaps in trying to redefine what it is, because you may develop a product, and it may be okay for the domestic scene, but you'll have to alter somewhat for the international scene. So give us an insight as to how you're able to help them shape what it is that they expecting to achieve on the international and regional market. Right.
When any young entrepreneur comes to Export St. Lucia, they're given individual attention. So normally we get, if they've gone through the normal system of going through SEDU, we would already have a profile of that person at Export St. Lucia. So one of our client managers would take on that client and do an assessment of them and see what it is that they have that they would like to offer to the market. Export St. Lucia offers a lot of varying services that persons probably don't know about, that we probably need to do a little more PR on. But we do primary market research. For example, if somebody has a product which needs to be exported, we go into the market for you. For example, so if you have a product you'd like to export to Trinidad, for example, in Denell's case, we would go into Trinidad and look at what are the trends in Trinidad, what's happening, what's the demand there for that product in Trinidad. We also do secondary market research, which is, we're talking about white papers. So at our own desk, we have access to quite a bit of information worldwide. We have a very wide network which we use to give entrepreneurs a lot of the information that they need. We conduct a lot of industry trends. So no matter what the industry that you're in, no matter what the sector that you're operating in, there is somebody at Export St. Lucia to handle that for you. So we'd go and tell you what's happening in the sector now that you're operating in. Who are your major competitors? What are their pricing? How should you price your product? What should be your cost of, what is your cost of production? How you could cut your cost of production to probably get another a better cost and to compete better in the market. We also do market research reports. We do business-to-business meetings. So for example, when we've done all of those things for a small, for an entrepreneur, youth entrepreneur, we've given you all the data. We've told you whether your product, how your product would do in that market. We've had occasions to tell somebody, no, you cannot go to that market because your product would just not work there. This is a better market. We also set up business-to-business meetings. So we would then contact buyers or contact persons in that external market and set up those meetings for you. What happens is that Export St. Lucia, because we are a government agency, a statutory agency, we go with a lot of weight into the market. People normally trust government agencies, and so it is a lot easier for us to set up meetings. We have access to the embassies overseas. We have access to higher network that probably the youth would not have access to, and we're able to set up those meetings for those young persons and guide them through. So we normally tell them how you should approach that meeting. What should you say? How you should sell your product? What are the things that you shouldn't say? What is the culture in that place that you shouldn't go? So we do a lot of hand-holding of those young persons to ensure that their product gets there, does better in the international market. What we would tell persons is to try to use as much what you have available to you. It's very scary and very lonely going alone because you don't have the backing of an agency with you. And with Export St. Lucia, and even the young persons we've worked a lot with Joan and Dujon, for example. And he's one of our success stories, and he has really listened to a lot of what we've had to say, and he's also very, very intelligent. So he comes with his own ideas, and we've learned a lot from him too as to how to work with youth entrepreneurs. And so for us, it's really building that kind of relationship and ensuring that you succeed at the end of the day.
So how scary was it for you, Denell?
It was extremely scary. You see, the thing about it is that I have trained myself to lean into fear. So if I'm scared to do something, or if I realize that this is a big, big, big problem, and I'm just one person trying to make a difference, I'll be like, listen, I have nothing to lose here, right? As opposed to looking at, oh, look at everybody coming up against me. So every single thing that you go through is a learning process.
That warrior's mindset.
Exactly. Right? So everything you learn from, you improve, you grow. So there is no downside. Right? At the end of the day, either you succeed or you learn. Failure doesn't exist. And once you go into every single opportunity with that type of mindset, whether it's a business you're looking at, whether it's a new job, or whether it's an idea that for a product that you want to create to sell to a company, then once you go into it with that type of mindset, there's no possible way that you can lose. And you'll only fail at it if you give up.
So what was your biggest hurdle?
Our biggest hurdle is specific to our industry. Is actually dealing with government regulation, because the regulations were too slow to implement at the rate that the industry was growing, right? So let's say you have an industry growing at an exponential rate and you have policy trying to catch up to that. This was a problem because for companies like mine, which are small, going up against massive oil companies, fuel companies, and utilities who have monopolies on the industry, it became quite a challenge, because I said this, that imagine a utility has a castle, and without the right policies, you're building a wall around that castle with a moat and alligators and sharks in that moat. And the drawbridge is up. So, and I'm standing on the outside of it, waiting, trying to enter, but it's protected because the government hasn't created that opportunity for me to walk in. So what we did, we disrupted and created our own opportunities. We built our own door, we built our own castle, and now we are at the table ready to have a conversation.
And so you wanted that voice to be heard with that mindset of never take no.
Of course.
So, but we have to take a break now, though, and we'll take that short break. When we come back, we'll be continuing our discussion, looking at the opportunities for young entrepreneurs amid COVID-19 and beyond. As part of government's social stabilization plan to assist persons who have lost their means of earning due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the government of St. Lucia has implemented the Income Support Program, where non-contributors to the NIC shall receive a monthly payment of $500 for the next 3 months. Taxi drivers, jet ski operators, vendors, agro-processors, tour guides, hairdressers, barbers, small bar and restaurant operators, construction workers, and other sole traders who meet the criteria can apply using the Government of St. Lucia's website, www.govt.lc. Payments will be made directly via electronic transfer to the recipient's bank account. The Income Support Program, simple strides towards recovery.
What's in the food you're eating? Do you really even know? All the chemicals and hormones used to accelerate their growth. All the artificial flavoring, sweeteners and colors too. We consume and we don't spare a thought for the damage that they'll do. No, think about the children. Think about the children. How will we save them? Chemicals and GMOs are not the solution. Use organic and join.
Excessive agrochemical use, additives, and genetically modified foods are harmful to health and the environment. Join the good food revolution. Grow, buy, and consume organic. A message from Rise St. Lucia and the Ministry of Sustainable Development with funding from the GEF Small Grants Program, UNDP.
The good food revolution.
Welcome back, and we are discussing the investment and business opportunities. Part 2 of our discussion, we're focusing on youth economic empowerment. Before we went to break, Denell made very interesting points there again. Lessons from the mouth of babes. And so, Sunita, I wanted to ask you, he spoke of the regulations and the lack thereof, and of course the sector rapidly evolving, and you find that policymakers are slow to catch on as to what the changing environment is all about. From an export standpoint, how do you deal with situations like that? Because you now have to ready a business for an international market that is, quite frankly, ahead in the game. But locally, on the home front, we're not quite there yet. So how do you fix that, the sort of mismatch situation?
It's always a little difficult when you look at emerging, new and emerging industries. I think we have to understand that government operates on history, what we know, on best practices. And it's taken us a while, but I think everybody is now getting on board in terms of understanding about innovation and understanding where the world is going now. I think one of the things that we have learned is that pandemics traditionally have created opportunities. So after major pandemics, you have advances in healthcare. You have apps being developed in healthcare. After pandemic, it was after the financial crisis that you really saw Uber, and you really saw Airbnb taking off. And so I think what we have all recognized is that pandemics are also giving us opportunities to change. What is important is that Export St. Lucia, like we said, is a statutory agency, and one of our main objectives is to ensure that we do advocacy for our clients. So if our clients were to come to us and say, I have a particular difficulty somewhere, we can then take that onto the higher authorities and then find a way to solve that issue for them. We've done it before. Clients have come to us and they've said, I have this particular issue at the ports. I have a particular issue somewhere, wherever along the business chain, that they have had issues. And the strength that we have is that we are part of the Ministry of Commerce. So normally I'd probably call the Permanent Secretary in Commerce, or I'd call the Chair of Export St. Lucia, or I'd call the Minister and say, we have this problem that our businesses are facing, and this is what we require. And so we've done it a lot, and we've normally been heard, and normally people come back and they say to us, okay, this is the progress on what's happening. So Denell, I think one of the issues that have really plagued us is that whenever it's new and it's an emerging industry, there's no real plan as to how you should go about doing it. So everybody is learning. The young entrepreneur is learning, and so is the government. So we're all learning together, and I think that as long as persons are willing to have that conversation, normally we are able to get through. One of the things I can say is that when young persons like Denell bring up those issues, it brings the issues to the table. And these are things we probably would not have looked at before. But when you add a voice to it, it then tells us there's an issue we need to address, and normally these issues are addressed. So like we said, for new and emerging industries, it's a learning atmosphere for all of us. But we do try to ensure that we advocate for changes for our clients.
Along those same lines, we're looking at standards. We're having to meet all of those internationally described standards onto our products. How does Export St. Lucia assist in that?
It's not only with standards, but increasingly the international world demands a lot more of our entrepreneurs. We're talking about standards, packaging, what packaging you use, what are you selling, what's the story behind what you're selling. And so the demand is high for the product, but the requirements are also pretty high. So we work very closely with the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. They sit on our board, and so whenever our clients require any kind of standards, we then advocate for that with the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. What I could also tell you, another example of advocating, is that we've had quite a bit of interest in agricultural products for export, the export market. So the demand is tremendous in the external market. But for example, Canada would tell you, I have specific requirements for whatever is coming to the market. St. Lucia didn't have a very well-established post-harvest facility. And so what we also did a lot of that advocating, and we spoke to the Ministry of Agriculture, and they really came on board with us and said, yes, this is necessary. If we don't have a pack house that is certified, in terms of GAP certification, HACCP certification, then we will not be able to export agricultural products to Canada. And what has happened is that a pack house facility has been commissioned, and there is a facility that has been built in Cul-de-sac, and we are quite on our way with the St. Lucia Marketing Board towards getting HACCP certification for that facility. So it is really about the requirements are tremendous. You are asked to do, we have been paying for persons to get their certification at Export St. Lucia. We assist small businesses with that. We have a project ongoing now where we'll be assisting 8 businesses to test their products in external markets. So test it, make sure that you're up to standards, make sure that your packaging is what the market requires. We know that the markets are moving towards more eco-friendly products, and so Export St. Lucia has been doing quite a bit of work. So there's a project ongoing now which will be assisting some businesses, and a lot of them are associations made up of a lot of young persons to get their product tested, to ensure that you are meeting the required standards that the market demands, and to make sure that you're packaging. And we're talking about physical products, but also services. A lot of persons offer services, and so Export St. Lucia also assists with that. What is the quality of service that you should be giving? What is the aftercare service that you should be giving to your client? And so we give that kind of assistance to all those businesses.
Wow, there's a lot there.
Yes.
We have a question coming in from our askmeanythingntn@gmail.com platform, and suppose Denell, you will take that. The question is, do you believe there is need for competition laws in St. Lucia to assist startups and small businesses who may face extreme external pressure from traditional established companies who will try to ensure that startups fail? This was the pressure of competition.
I definitely believe that it would be a good thing because it levels the playing field. So now you know, okay, I have a chance to do something. And I mean, you're putting a lot of time and energy into your business, a lot of years of your life that you're not going to get back. And it would be good to know that you can actually go toe-to-toe with the big boys, I should say, and actually make a difference and get your product or your service out there. So yes, I agree, it would help.
Competition laws would help. Dave, over at Invest in Lucia, the linkages that you formed with other like agencies, like export and so forth, can you give us an idea as to who those agencies would be and what sort of working relationship you have with them to help people like Denell?
Okay, so currently we actually do have a task force that, for the Business Incubator project, and on that task force, of course, we have Invest in Lucia, we have Export St. Lucia, we have the St. Lucia Development Bank, we have the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association. And in addition to that, once the project kicked off, in terms of the initial assessment and a lot of the meetings we had, we did engage agencies like the South Louis Community College, St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, the Global Environment Facility, the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, Coalition of Service Industries, the National Skills Development Center, the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the National ICT Center. We engaged the OECS, University of the West Indies Open Campus, the James Belgrave Micro Enterprise Development Fund, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Agriculture and Tourism at the highest level. As you would know, the ecosystem has a number of players, and of course you would have heard that from Sunita in some of our contributions. So basically, we've engaged everybody who would have impacted or provide some kind of support or development to the entrepreneur at any development stage. So we are in dialogue. In the initial dialogues, we got positive feedback. A lot of persons would have loved for the incubator to be up and running. You heard the cries of the young entrepreneurs, but I can assure you that the engagement is across the board and is really to strengthen all the key players to get that additional support that really will propel them.
Yes, the cry across the board. When COVID-19 hit, Denell, what was your first thought as a young businessman?
All right. The first thing I thought, okay, a lot of people will die during this, right? Second thing was a lot of businesses will die as well. And I mean, it's sad to say, but it's the harsh reality. And the thing about being an entrepreneur is that you have to try to get to the reality as quickly as possible, because only then, by accepting the reality, can you set change in motion. And I did that relatively quickly. And thankfully that I understood that there's a market crash every 10 years. Right? Most people don't know that. But I know it well enough to know to prepare for it beforehand. So I prepared for the market crash. COVID catalyzed that. So I prepared since November, December 2019 for a market crash in 2020. So when COVID hit and everything went belly up, we were in a good position to ride it out. So what we've been doing during these stages is that we've been innovating through COVID. So we're running most of our stuff online, which we were doing already pre-COVID and pre-market crash. So we continue doing that and doubling down on it. So now it's something that puts us in a really strong position and allows you to, if you can run in sand, when things get better and you're actually on a track, you'll be miles ahead of everybody else. You'll be stronger than everybody else. And that is what we're doing and what position we're at right now.
Without giving away too much of your secrets, give us an idea as to how did you prepare for this market crash that you knew was coming? But of course, COVID decided to come and compound the situation further. So how does an entrepreneur prepare for this?
All right, so what we did is that we actually raised funding round. So raising funding in the region is really, really hard, very extremely difficult. And you can go for incubators, you can go for accelerators. We've done all of this. Incubators and accelerators usually give you grants, which are assigned to a certain task for development in your business. Now, you'll still need a lot more cash to really get to the top of where you need to be to really get your product or service out there. Depends on the business that you have. I mean, I happen to choose one of the most difficult businesses in the world, which is energy. But I mean, I consider it to be fun. Right? I like challenges, and it was one of the biggest challenges at the time, because I used to ask my grandparents, why didn't you invest in oil when oil was just getting started? So now I got an opportunity to invest in a new oil, so I'm doing it. And by raising the funding, it really helped us secure our cash flow, right? So now we know what our run rate is, and we know exactly how much money we need to spend every single month to stay afloat. So we raised enough capital to be able to do that. Not only did we do that, but we also partnered with a strategic investor. So it wasn't just cash, it was smart money. And that is something a lot of entrepreneurs need to know. You don't just need cash. You need somebody who brings more than cash to the table. They bring resources, they bring their network, they bring technologies, they bring expertise. So we partnered with a very, very successful company out of the French Caribbean and also operating in Africa as well. So it really helped us beef up our balance sheet and continue innovating through COVID.
Right. So when you have the young entrepreneurs who are staying ahead of the game, how much does that push the sort of incubator program to expand to meet more of what their demands and needs are?
I think it just shows the greater need and the urgency for a support program like this. I mean, the feedback Denell is giving, a lot of other entrepreneurs are giving, it is vital, because it kind of shapes how you develop a framework that will encompass all the necessary support that will really help these entrepreneurs.
Okay, wonderful. You know, I have a quote here from our minister, Honorable Bradley Felix, who is the Enterprise Development and Consumer Affairs Minister, speaking on the Integrated Program, he says that he recognizes that in today's global business environment, entrepreneurship has been the lifeblood to many economies through evident growth, economic development, as well as job creation, and as a result, there needs to be a deliberate attempt to encourage entrepreneurship, innovation, and continuous improvement among the youth and wider society towards sustainable growth. He also noted that the government of St. Lucia, through Invest St. Lucia, is embarking on strengthening the entrepreneurship ecosystem with the introduction of the Business Incubator and Accelerator program. So that program has been acknowledged as one of the principal means of providing a comprehensive range of business support services that can contribute to the successful establishment of new micro and small enterprises and the growth of fledgling ones. Denell, what do you think that the programs like the Incubator Accelerator program, do you think that they are missing anything in what your own realities were as you were beginning to start your business?
Yeah, they need funding. Because it's one thing to give entrepreneurs and budding entrepreneurs access to resources that can help grow their business. But going through an incubator, going through an accelerator, at the end of it, you need a substantial amount of capital to really span the valley of despair, also called the valley of death, which is where a lot of startups go to die. And it's also called the duck curve. So you really need a lot of cash to write this out and go through this process. So most people, most of these programs, they don't have the resources available, and they depend on other people to bring it in. The issue is that there is a real lack of that kind of patient capital in the region. So a lack of angel investors and a lack of people who want to really put their money where their mouth is, per se, and give back to people to help with the development of the country. Most of the business people here would just put their money in acres of land somewhere, right? As opposed to really helping with the development of startups who can possibly add value to your business. So that is actually called corporate funding. And using corporate funding, it actually spans the gap because you get the best of both worlds. You get some patient capital. The businesses who are established get access to an innovative and disruptive startup. So as opposed to you being disrupted out of the marketplace, you actually invest in the disruptor and you disrupt yourself. Now that sets you apart from everybody else in the game and really puts you at the world-class standard of business.
So how does Export St. Lucia now, Sunita, begin to fill in that gap? Because he's making an exceedingly good point here, where you find that without the funding, then your businesses really don't exist, and certainly not to the standard at which you will be ready to ship them out. So how does export fit into that conversation?
That's one of the things that we have been really advocating for, is for a grant funding facility to be placed within Export St. Lucia for exactly that purpose. In the meantime, what we are doing is to really build those relationships with the St. Lucia Development Bank and with other commercial banks. Because one of the things we've realized is that for youth entrepreneurs, their biggest issue really is financing. It really is an issue in terms of getting any initial, like Denell said, a lot of them have to use their savings, and that can only take them as far as possible. But then afterwards, they really need that initial injection. And what has been happening is that a lot of young entrepreneurs really use direct equity funding, which is not really the best for young entrepreneurs, or there's a reliance on debt financing, which is also not the best, because these are really small enterprises, and you don't want to be laden with debt from the very beginning of your enterprise. And so the St. Lucia Development Bank, Export St. Lucia, recently signed an MOU with them, where we'd be sending young persons to get that kind of concessionary funding from St. Lucia Development Bank. But one of the conversations we've been having with them and with our commercial partners is to change the way in which young persons pay back their loans, for example. It should not be a scheduled fixed repayment. These businesses really can't operate like that. What it should really be is something based on the revenues that they make, on the cycle of how their revenues come in. For example, we have a lot of small, Export St. Lucia has a large clientele of small enterprises based on agriculture, and there's only the harvesting period has to come in, the planting period, then they harvest. During that time, it's not fixed on a monthly, every 28th day of the month. That's not happening. They're not getting revenues at that time, particularly when they're just beginning the businesses. And so that's the discussion we're having, that you kind of amend the terms of repayment for those young startups, that you really look at when their first real revenue comes in, that you also look at angel investing. There are a lot of persons in St. Lucia who have that funding available that they can invest and get some equity from the businesses. And persons are a little risk averse in terms of doing that. So I think we have a bit of work to do in trying to attract persons towards doing that, looking at mentorship for young persons, and these are all things that they really need to have. But Export St. Lucia we've been working on that. I know our board is also making a case that some grant fundings facilities should be placed within Export St. Lucia more specifically for that purpose, that there are a lot of young persons who should not be going into business, going in with a lot of debt. They just shouldn't, and we really owe that to them in terms of assisting them to really start off and get off, because small businesses are really what make up the backbone of your business economy. They're really what they're the ones who hire the most persons, they have the most jobs, they hire persons of different strata in your society. So you don't have to have a PhD and masters to work within small business. There are a variety of jobs within small businesses that persons can be employed in. So it's actually a good investment in a small business by going through grant funding.
And this is just a free flow question,
right?
Because he made a point about talking about that people are quicker to invest, tie up their monies in land, rather than look to see how that money can be otherwise invested. How do we begin to even change the mindset that, because, you know, I grew up hearing that if you buy land and it's going to appreciate, and so, you know, you have all of this money there, the great value of it, but it's really stagnant, just at a standstill. So how do we begin to have that sort of shift in our mindsets, how we work, how we think as a nation?
Right.
Anybody?
What Export St. Lucia has been doing, we have quite a few examples of those actually, of businesses who require that kind of investment. And a lot of them, we do our assessments. And I always say to people, if I were an investor, I'd be putting my money in there. And that's what we've been trying to do, is really develop those investment profiles for other persons. We've just started that, telling them a little profile on the business and what the amount of capital injection that they require and what would be the returns for them. But I think it's really something that St. Lucians as citizens, we really need to come around to, Lissa, like you've said, in terms of investing in business. And we don't have that culture normally. We're very risk averse persons. We like stability, and we like knowing, okay, the land will always be there and it will accumulate, but you're quite unsure of what's happening with business. But that's the way to go, is really investing in those kind of startups, because when you look at worldwide, they're the ones that become the huge enterprises later on.
So for Denell, for you would have appreciated having at least 10 people say, let me help you, let me inject some cash into there. But would you have been willing to part with some of your shares?
Yeah, of course. But at the end of the day, I presented to a lot of the people, and they never put their money where their mouth was. So it was a bunch of hot air at the end of the day. And we need people who are taking actionable steps to make a difference in startups.
So the business community, just citizens as a whole, to just be more open to the ideas.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. We're due for another break. Did we just hear Dr. Nurse is back with us? Okay, wonderful. Dr. Nurse, just be patient. We're going to take a few seconds of a break. When we come back, we're coming straight across to you. Thank you so much for staying with us. We continue the conversation here as we look at the business opportunities, youth economic empowerment. Before we went to break, we heard Dr. Keith Nurse chiming in there. Dr. Nurse? Do we still have Dr. Nurse online?
Hi, how are you?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. You've been gone for a large chunk of the conversation, so we throw over to you to hear your thoughts.
At a little bit of a technical thing. I was able to listen in on the moderator conversation. What has been described is not unique to St. Lucia. Most of our island developing state developments have a very same problem, which is it means economies stranded on rural traditional areas, particularly independent and import-oriented sectors where the risks are lower. So what that does is how capital, domestic capital, for anything that is innovative, particularly export-oriented.
Okay,
shift it low.
Right. We'll have to stop you here, Dr. Nurse. We are having a very, very difficult time in hearing your contribution. So what I may ask the producer to do is if we can disengage the link and just call again. So perhaps if we do that, to have a sort of reboot, that may be better. So Dr. Nurse, if you could perhaps call us back, or if the producer can try another link in which we can have this conversation. If Dr. Nurse, I'm very interested in hearing his viewpoints.
Okay, sure.
Thank you so much. Let's look at some of the new modalities for business and how this can help us, the new ways of doing things. And are we even ready for the new way of doing business? Are we really ready as a people? We have no choice. We have to move with it. So what are your thoughts? Anyone?
I think people are kind of moving away gently from the brick and mortar kind of business. We've always had this impression in our mind that there must be a physical building for us to do business. What COVID has done is to really change our mindset as to how that business can be done differently. I don't think many of us really thought we could have had so many Zoom meetings in our lives, and we've all been having many Zoom meetings every day. And what it has done, although at the beginning it may have been challenging, what it has done is to really reorient our minds, and it's becoming the new normal for us. A lot of businesses are moving towards online ordering, and before I'm one of those persons who'd like to go into the store and physically touch my product. What happens now is that you've gotten accustomed now to having online ordering and having things delivered to your home, and it's the convenience of having that. For businesses, it's also the travel costs that you'd probably have. It's cutting down a lot and also impacting the environment. You're actually helping save the environment during that time. But I think a lot of it has to do with really using the digital platforms that are available. Dave and I were having that conversation before the show, that persons would have told you we were always interested in getting a digital platform, but now they've had no choice and they're really getting into that. So I think business is changing, and after this period is over, business will be different, be done differently. I think a lot of costs will be cut. A lot of persons, for example, people in Denell's industry, you would normally have had to hire an HR specialist, hire this person, hire 10 persons to do this, but who would come physically into your office. Now you can outsource all of those services. You can actually outsource it to the best in the world so that your business actually gets the best from the world. And so I think that's the kind of positive spin we have to look at when we're talking about how business changes when we look at the impact of Corona.
How prepared are you at Invest St. Lucia there with the Incubator and Accelerator program to meet that changing environment for business?
Well, prior to COVID-19, the plan was always to, in terms of the first phase, to have a virtual incubator. But given that COVID has given us the new normal, it even gives us a greater importance, showing us that there is an even greater need to have that implementation of a virtual program where many persons could benefit. Like Ms. Daniel was saying, now many persons who might before would have wanted to physically go into an office and maybe conduct business, now they could actually stay from home or even an office and get that support. So for sure, going forward, one of our key components with regards to the business incubator would be the virtual program, where persons could tap into that platform and get as much support as possible.
Denell, for you have been the sort of cutting edge person from the get-go. So what COVID has done and that sort of new normal that it is bringing in, is it really a new normal for you, or is it just continuing as business as usual?
It has been business as usual for us because, like I said, we saw it coming, we prepared for it, and it showed the importance of what we were doing. So right now, the only way of really selling is remote. The way of doing business, like Sunita has said, is going remote. And this stems from lateral economics. Everything is being decentralized and disrupted. We're going straight to consumer. So somebody like me in our business, what we've been using is online meetings. We've been using technology, so we have the systems in place on our platform. We also use satellites to map out where we're going to be putting projects and use 3D modeling technologies to develop a project even before we have to go to the site to see the physical structure. Now, this saves us a lot of time, and it also saves us a lot on customer acquisition. So this is the route, and this is what technology has enabled. So let's say you were to spend $100 or $200 on driving to a customer, spending time with them, and actually developing something that they would need thereafter. You save that time. You're now in your office or in the comfort of your home. You still meet with the customer. You get all that information that you would need, and then you can develop something and send them a proposal all within 2 to 3 hours. That changes the game. That changes the conversation, because now your customer doesn't have to be from St. Lucia. They can be located anywhere on the planet. All you need is an internet connection.
How do you see COVID-19 changing the nature of your industry? Have you given thought to that?
COVID-19 has, like I said, catalyzed the technological approach to an older industry. So an industry that had a lot of infrastructure built in. People are now seeing the importance of the internet in the industry. I like to consider it to be called the internet, the internet of energy, and that's what we're building. We're building an interconnected energy system whereby you have your solar system or your renewable energy system connecting to your electric vehicle, connecting to the grid, and allowing everything to work together seamlessly. So now you're no longer a consumer, you become a prosumer. You can now, when you're on vacation, your house can be generating electricity and you can sell it back to the utility company and get money from that. Your car, which is parked in a parking lot whilst you're at your office, can now be opted in to sell power back to the utility company when they most need it, making you money. So it's like just getting notifications that you just got paid. Now, we really want to empower people with what we do. And that is really, really pivotal in this economy, because we understand that there is the restraints that we have to operate in now, and people will really benefit from this type of economic model.
Wonderfully said there. Sunita, I know that you said for Export St. Lucia, you've been working on the new way of trying to market the businesses, your clients. So what has been the movement on that? And just give us an idea as to how you are going to meet this new normal.
Right. Export St. Lucia, our work is basically done out of St. Lucia. A lot of it is done out of St. Lucia because that's what we're trying to do, get St. Lucia goods and services out of St. Lucia. That has not been what we've not been able to do that with COVID. And so we've had to really innovate and think outside of the box. So the same thing that we're asking our businesses to do, we've had to do ourselves. And one of the things that we normally take part in are trade shows. So we normally go overseas with the product or the service that is being offered to sell that service overseas. And we've not been able to do that for the past few months. So we came up with the idea of having a virtual trade mission. And we've been getting quite a bit. We've sent out expressions of interest, and we've been getting quite a bit of interest in that from our business community. Because we have such a wide and excellent network outside of St. Lucia, we are networked with quite a bit of chambers of commerces outside of St. Lucia. We are tied in with embassies outside of St. Lucia and a lot of businesses outside of St. Lucia. So we've been able to have a buyer network set up quite well. What we've done in Export St. Lucia is to put all the products offerings online. So we've now set up virtual profiles of businesses which we sell virtually, like we've said, to our buyers. So the virtual trade show, which will be taking place the first week of July, is a first for Export St. Lucia. And it's something we really focused on getting done successfully. And to have our entrepreneurs here who would not have had the opportunity. Normally we take persons with us when we go, but we're not able to take 10 companies at a time all the time. We did so recently with our OECS mission where we took 14 companies overseas. What we're trying to do is to get those large numbers of persons to expose their products virtually to those buyers. So we've set up those buyer meetings, and we are looking just to match the products and services to those buyers. So that's one of the things that we've been doing. We've also trying to get a virtual marketplace set up and working with persons to get that done. So we don't do a lot of things on our own. We do everything with our private sector partners. So that's something we're trying to work on, trying to get a virtual marketplace set up where from now on, if you want to buy a bottle of water, you can do so without leaving your home and it will get delivered to you. So these are the activities that we're getting involved in. We've also had quite a few webinars, which has cut down our own costs. So normally we'd have to have conference room costs, lunch and break and transporting persons. Now we've set up those webinars where we've had maximum attendance. Very recently we had one, Access to Finance, which was almost 80 persons attending that webinar and asking questions and being interactive. And our cost was just a Zoom call and just the cost of Zoom. And so it's saving the agency a lot of money ourselves. So we're innovating while we're asking others to also innovate. So definitely persons will be behind a little more on the virtual trade mission that Export St. Lucia is undertaking. And we are bringing in new and emerging enterprises. That's one of the things that we've said at the outset, that we are going to take quite a few small businesses, because that would now be the opportunity they probably didn't have before to sell their products. So their products will get that same exposure that the big companies that we work with also get.
So how do you keep the pulse on the market itself, right. The consumers overseas? Because now we're seeing that turmoil. We've moved from COVID-19 that has now escalated with we've seen protest marches all over the world right now, riots in some parts of the world. So how are you keeping the pulse on the consumer to really know that they are ready and that we're positioning ourselves to catapult once they're ready?
You're so right, Lissa, because we made our own plans as to when we're going to get back into business. And because of our network, we build excellent relationships. So at any moment in time, we are able to contact anybody, anywhere in the world, on any business opportunity, because we have that distributor network, which we normally maintain and we normally keep in touch with. So we would have said before, an excellent opportunity is here in St. Lucia right now that's growing exponentially, and we're talking about the CMOS. And we were saying, okay, July is the time that we need to hit then. But that was us planning. But then by the time we spoke to our distributors, he would have said, we need to change the approach, because the consumer, yes, is looking for healthier alternatives. That's one of the things we've found. Coming from COVID, everybody wants to eat healthier. Everybody's exercising. Everybody cares a little more now about their health than they did before. That presents an opportunity for us. But the timing was not the right one. So now we had to change and go back and rework our strategy and say, okay, when is it that we attack that particular market with that product? And all of that information comes from our distributors in the market. So we don't do anything on our own. We have key persons who are set in the markets who would call and say, we have this idea, what do you think? How do you think we should approach it? And they normally give us very good responses and very good feedback. So for now, we know New York, we can't really do too much there in terms of what we normally do. So the UK is another one, because the flights are a little. But what we have realized is that we can work now in the region. We can do a lot of work within the OACS countries still, because our transportation system still operates. Our ports are still open. So we've kind of moved a lot of our focus towards the OACS and CARICOM, as opposed to the UK that we had our eyes set on first. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we had a mission to the OACS, where I said earlier, we brought a number of big companies and smaller ones to the mission. We're now seeing quite a lot of results from that mission, a lot of contracts, and we have seen a lot of the products are being shipped out of St. Lucia. So exports are still taking place. We had a service provider who recently got a service contract, and they're trying to now to go into that market within the OACS. So there are a few things, a few regulations we have to work around. That's being worked on. But all of this to say that even though we've not been able to go follow our normal plan, because we normally plan and we know what we're going to do. No, we can't go to the UK at this point, but we are able to do quite a lot of business still within the OACS.
So for Denell, for you, looking at the market, looking at what the global events are, how do you keep your pulse on what the consumer is more likely to need and gravitate towards?
All right, so something that's key to every entrepreneur is we listen to our customers. All right, the customers will tell you what they want and what they need. Just listen with a different air. So at times you listen and say, okay, this person is complaining about the service or the product that I have. But they're actually giving you valuable data and input on how you can improve. That's how you look at it. So listening to the customer, taking that feedback and implementing it to improve what you're already doing. That is how you stay ahead of everybody else. And you also watch what the competition is doing and how they are treating their customers directly. So those relationships are really what sets you apart, because at the end of the day, the customer base is the lifeblood of your business. Your competition doesn't really matter. You can have all the competition in the world, but if you have customers in your pipeline, you're going to survive.
And for you, Dave, your experience with the incubator, some of the advice that you give to young entrepreneurs or likely to give to them when they're faced with such challenges?
Like anything else, you would have to adapt. I mean, since COVID-19, we've been hearing so much talk about the digital economy. If you wanna survive in this dynamic business environment, you will have to make some kind of adjustments. And I think Denell made a very important point in terms of how do you relate to your customer. A lot of times you get that initial feedback, and sometimes you may do away with it, but really and truly, this is valuable input in terms of how do you adjust your business model and even continue to grow that customer base and even be more successful.
All right. We want to say to you that your participation is always welcomed and very valued here. So we have the telephone number that you can call. That's 468-2162. That's 468-2162. You could call in with your question and your comment for our panelists. Let's take a short break at this time. We'll be back with you and hopefully your telephone calls.
It's easy to become afraid during a disease outbreak, especially a pandemic. How can I catch it? Who already has it? How do I stay safe? How can I keep my family safe? Uncertainty can lead us to reject or to be afraid of people affected by COVID-19. It's normal that we feel worried. But sticking with the facts on how to prevent COVID-19 from spreading and what to do if you encounter symptoms is our best defense. Rejecting or fearing people can cause them to hide their symptoms. It discourages people from practicing preventive behaviors like wearing masks and physical distancing. It can even stop people from seeking healthcare. Ultimately, this means the disease is harder to diagnose, treat, and contain. So how can we overcome fear and stigma to help the fight against COVID-19? Words matter. Talk to and about people affected by the virus with respect. Spread the facts. Practice and share the recommendations endorsed by your health authorities. Be kind and look after each other. Check in on your family, friends, and neighbors. Offer support where you can. Have you seen social stigma happening in your community? How did you respond? Tell us in the comments below.
And welcome back to our discussion here. We're looking at the economic empowerment of young entrepreneurs. I was looking at business and opportunity, COVID-19 and beyond. We have a question coming in from our Ask Me Anything platform. Are there any moves to facilitate small businesses coming together to import goods or raw materials as a block rather than each person importing their own? And also, is there a small business registry or website available so there can be network or support in buying and trading with each other? Sunita, any ideas on this?
We normally deal with exports, but I guess I could also speak about imports because a lot of our businesses do have to import a lot of their raw materials. So they do need the raw materials for them to make their final product. And that's one of the things why it's very important to join one of the associations. For example, the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association. If you're part of that, they also assist with bulk buying of imported products. So I think that's something that we should all look towards doing, particularly businesses that do along the same line of business. So agricultural associations, Export St. Lucia has recently assisted in forming an exporter association. We are going to be assisting 2 other associations to set up and really form themselves into an association to be able to take advantage of a lot of those opportunities that you just spoke about. So it's something that we're looking at doing and something that we encourage businesses to do, to join those associations that are there. There's a St. Lucia Coalition of Services that service providers can join. Like I said, the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association, if they're into manufacturing, and these associations would be able to give them that kind of guidance and support that they require.
Denell, you talked about the importance of networking. Not only that, but to this particular question, the idea now of being able to formalize yourself as industry players. So how has your experience been in terms of, is there an association when it comes to businesses in the energy sector here in St. Lucia?
Yep, that's actually something we noticed that needed to be done. And we're working on it as we speak. So we're making headway. We've already had conversations with the industry stakeholders, and we're going to be launching something that can actually help lobby to get better regulations, more public-friendly regulations in place so that everybody can benefit from this massive opportunity to make your own energy.
But you point that out as one of the benefits. Can you give us an idea what other benefits would be? How would companies would be able to benefit from an association?
Yeah, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, all companies who would be a part of this association benefit both directly and indirectly. Directly, you're part of a network of like-minded individuals who are eco-conscious and looking to make a massive difference in that space. That can really set you apart globally, because now you can advertise to more eco-conscious consumers of your products or services to listen, look at us, look at what we're doing. We care about you, we care about your health, we care about the environment. You should buy from us. And in the other route, they're actually benefiting by getting access to industry professionals who can install technologies at their facilities which will save them a lot of money, improve their cash flow, and reduce their operating expenses.
Sunita, we did have an inquiry there online. You spoke earlier about a grant facility, and we have someone saying that grant acquisition assistance is a key service that you need to be able to offer and offer it very soon. So perhaps you could backtrack a bit on that. Perhaps you came in a bit late on the conversation, but give us just remind us of what the plan is.
Definitely. I mean, that's something that we know that is required. Like I've said, and Denell has spoken about it too, we're very much in touch with our clients. So we know what our clients want and what they need from us. And one of the things that they've always told us about is grant funding, and they need that kind of facility. So we have been making we have been making that kind of representation to the authorities that Export Solution needs those kind of grant facilities. But like we've said, we are assisting our clients to, in the meantime, to be able to access those grants from the St. Lucia Development Bank and the commercial banks. But Export St. Lucia also assists our clients with grant funding, for example, through the Direct Assistant Grant Program that is with Caribbean Export. So we do look for grants outside that business support agencies like ourselves and trade promotion agencies can have access to, that we can then pass on to our clients. So we are all actively looking for it, but we know that a grant facility is one of the things that our clients have been asking us for, and that's one of the things we'd really like to deliver to them.
So how much hand-holding do you do when you have to access the grant funding for the entrepreneurs?
Export St. Lucia does a lot of hand-holding of clients. We normally take them all the way to the end. So in terms of developing the proposal to access the grant, we do that with them. So many times we've had to develop proposals for our clients because they don't have that kind of expertise, but we have that on staff. So we develop those proposals, we touch back and we do the financing with them, because most of them, they need to have financial records. Most of them probably don't have it very well set up. Export St. Lucia assists them in doing that kind of thing. So we normally make sure that we get them to the end of actually being successful in getting that kind of grant. That's one of the things that we measure ourselves by how much assistance we actually can give a client. So that's one of our success indicators. And so all our client managers know that, and there's a lot of emphasis on assisting persons that way.
We have another question coming in. Is there concession for import of equipment and materials for startup businesses of any nature, and how would the entrepreneur go about benefiting from it in any way? Maybe you can ask Denell to give us his experience. What was that like in being able to get your business in benefiting from concessions, if ever you had to go that route?
Yeah, that we have concessions in place for my industry specifically. So this saved us a lot of money, and it really helps. So I agree with the question. That is something that should be in place. So let's say your business is under 5 years old. You should have access to something that really helps you save money on that front, so that you can now be more competitive, like I said, against the bigger players, and you stand a fighting chance.
Sunita, you've had that experience, that conversation with your clients.
Definitely, and there are quite a few in almost all of the ministries. Clients who are tied to those ministries normally are able to get concessions on importing them raw materials, on importation of a lot of what they require. So that's something that's definitely there. I know for agriculture, you can get your agricultural inputs at those under the Agricultural Incentives Act. You are able to bring those in. It's the similar thing with manufacturing. So those facilities are there, they are available, and if persons are able to identify what they need, we're talking about machinery, costs of almost everything, vehicles and so on that you require in your business, there are those concessions available for them.
And investing, Lucia, can certainly help them trim off a lot of that fat in being able to get right to the heart of it.
Of course, once investors come in, both local and foreign, we work, like Sunita said, we do a lot of handholding, and we go through the relevant ministries and whatever concessions are available. Persons get an opportunity to access that, and of course make some kind of contribution towards their business model.
Wonderful. I'm being told that we have Dr. Nurse back with us, Dr. Keith Nurse, who is the principal to South Louis Community College. We've lost you there for quite some time. Dr. Nurse, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you quite clearly.
Oh, and that link, oh yes, that is so much better. That voice coming across nice and strong. So you've been gone for quite some time, and I know you have a lot to share with us, so the floor is now yours.
Okay, great. I've been able to catch up on some of the conversation, and it's a critical one. I think I was saying just before I got cut off by technology that this Lucia story that has been depicted in the comments and recommendations being outlined are not unusual. This is the case for most small island developing states and most developing economies. Particularly for small countries, one of the challenges is, of course, this financing scenario, which is most of the financing that's available is definitely not patient capital as we describe it. And it tends to be very risk averse as well. So you have a scenario where traditional firms in traditional sectors are fairly well capitalized, whereas new firms in new sectors are undercapitalized. And so unless you do something significantly different, you're not going to get a different result. So if you look at St. Lucia's export earnings for the last several years, outside of the services sector, the earnings in manufacturing and agro-related exports have actually been dropping. And so this is a clear signal that there's something in the system that needs to be retaught, reinvented, and so on. So one of the key recommendations that's been made to small island developing states is that if the state is the main driver of the economy, and that is the case normally, then one of the means by which these sectors can be catalyzed is through what we call strategic government procurement. Because the governments often account for somewhere between 35% and upwards as a share of GDP in these economies. And so by government, for example, saying that they're going to ensure that a certain size of their fleet of vehicles become either electric or utilize some other form of clean technologies, almost immediately you create a new sector in the economy. Or if all government buildings then go towards renewables, photovoltaics, rainwater capture. And so the government says that any new government building or the retrofitting of any government building is going to move in this direction. You catalyze a whole sector and you provide a useful source of funding that is not coming from some commercial bank or development bank per se. What you're doing is you're facilitating commercial activity just by making a shift in terms of the policy of government. Now, this creates a mechanism by which you can create new jobs. For example, green jobs, you can create new jobs in a whole range of areas, not only in the specific sector, but also, for example, in banking. So green financing now becomes a new window within the banking sector, along with the other green jobs that you are seeing taking place. So these are the mechanisms. So countries like St. Lucia are not going to make the shift by staying in the old normal. The status quo management frameworks that we've been battling with for the last several decades are not going to shift the needle. You need to do something more than that to jumpstart this process. And big governments and small governments are using strategic government procurement to push the process, because otherwise it's not going to happen just by the private sector and young entrepreneurs particularly trying their best. It's not going to be enough to make the transformation that we all desire. I hope that helps.
Yes, that does help quite a bit. Dr. Nurse, given the sheer size of our populations in the region, let's look at the OECS, for example, the size of our populations, looking at the sheer size of the economies, and you speak there about strategic procurement, how important is it for us at this juncture to be able to do all that we need to do more collaboratively in order for us to be able to have some economic impact?
Yes, you're quite correct. There is a clear need for what we call greater regional integration and collaboration and so forth. But there are some key sectors, particularly health, the food-related sector, and energy, particularly renewable energy-related sectors, where in each Caribbean country, the market is fairly sizable. So if you look at what we call the import sectors, and look at how much we're spending per annum, it gives you an indication of what is the size of the potential areas for import replacement. So in St. Lucia, there's already a 7-crop food program targeted at import replacement. Target is, I think, specifically at the tourism sector. So what does the tourism sector import? And what are the things that we could produce to replace those things? Now, foreign exchange is going to become, and has become, increasingly short supply in the COVID context. This is not going to get much better over the next 2 to 3 years. So what are we going to do? Are we going to hope for the best? No. What you have to do is strategically identify those areas that can generate some quick wins, and those that are medium to long term. And so the medium to long term requires more technology often, but you have to create the frameworks by which you can generate the value chain in terms of activities at the domestic level. So this is where there's some scope for national activity, but once you get to a certain scale, you want to be able to export to your next door neighbor. And this is where we need to strengthen the relationships, create some fluidity in terms of customs arrangements. But the big bugbear, though, tends to be shipping. Shipping and transport between Caribbean territories is exceedingly expensive. It makes us almost uncompetitive compared to our to rival firms coming out of Miami. So you could ship something from Miami to any Caribbean territory easier and faster than shipping it from one Caribbean country to another. So really, it makes this regional integration process extremely unprofitable, if not unfeasible, from a certain economic standpoint. I'll leave my comments at that for now.
Thank you very much. I did want to ask you, though, finally, Dr. Nurse, you were speaking there, and Article 164 came to mind, where we do have this arrangement where the smaller or less developed countries of CARICOM now have that sort of leg up, if you will, in being able to have the goods on the market at a more affordable rate than the extra regional products. How do you see this as being a win-win situation for the creation of new business?
Yeah, well, if you look at the sectors that have been identified, it's not every sector, it's a few sectors. I think there's some food-related sectors in particular that have been identified to generate domestic, upgrading, and so on. So you're starting with those key sectors. So yes, you can generate some additional import replacement there, as well as some jobs there. But those tend to be not very innovative sectors. They tend to be really sectors that we've been working with for a long time. And in some instances, there are sectors where it's not even indigenous products. So for example, I think pasta is on the list. Why is pasta on the list? Most of the ingredients for pasta are imported. Unless we're making pasta out of cassava or some other indigenous raw material. And so this is where we can begin to catalyze some domestic capabilities, but it means also that our domestic and regional populations need to change their taste. And that tends to be the elephant in the room. So we want the rest of the world to change, but we don't want to change ourselves. So it's not going to work that way. So clearly, even within the hotel sector, most of what is consumed by the tourists is imported. So if you have a framework that you have Article 164 generating this, creating policy space, and economic space for domestic firms, but there's such a high leakage in your tourism sector, then it's really all for naught. It's not increasing in improved economic resilience. So you have to be fighting this agenda on several levels. And tourism is the key driver of the economy. It accounts for in excess of 50–60% of the GDP, if you count both direct and indirect. And so unless you plug that hole in the tourism sector, many of the other initiatives are not going to generate the value added that we're talking about, or at least hoping for.
Let's step back into your educational hat there. How do you teach one to become an entrepreneur, or can you?
Well, there are two perspectives on that. One is that entrepreneurs are born. And yes, to some extent, there are personality traits that lend themselves to being entrepreneurial or not. But the other side of the coin is that entrepreneurship, like anything else, can be trained. You can learn. So we're not born learning how to be a doctor or to be a lawyer or to be an engineer. You have to learn and train to be those things. But what is more important is creating an entrepreneurial culture. And so this happens both in training institutions like Lissa Community College. We can do more of that. In fact, if you look at our new programming, it is trending more towards an entrepreneurial approach to training and human resource development. So that's why we have more things like incubators, accelerators, internships embedded in the new programming. So you can change that, but you then need to have a framework where once people graduate from the tertiary institution, so where do they go? What are the opportunities? And if the opportunities are there, then we, in many respects, training people for export, meaning to train them to migrate to another territory where the entrepreneurial culture is more receptive. So that's why many of your panelists have been really, I think, spot on by arguing what we need to do is create a framework by which people can find financing. But it's not just financing. You need business coaching to work in tandem with this funding and financing framework. And as well, you need to create a framework by which trade facilitation and market access is improved by giving these firms a leg up in new markets, both abroad as well as at home. So we cannot deny that even though our markets are small, we do need to ensure that we can increase our local value-added contribution. So yeah, this is a really vexing question, we can argue. But creating an entrepreneurial culture is really where it's at.
Thank you. And for the South Louis Community College as we begin to emerge out of COVID-19. How do you see the college being a part of that driving force to create this new culture?
Well, we're doing several things. So I indicated earlier that we're creating these gateways to global careers programs, which are programs that are 2 years, like an associate degree, but they tied into access to foreign universities to complete these degrees, either an additional year or additional 2 years. In some instances, we are now negotiating for what we call a 2+2, so 2 at home, 2 abroad, plus 1 more year to get a master's degree. So we have several of these discussions ongoing currently. But the key driver, though, is that we've targeted some key growth areas. So if you look at if you go to our website, you would see that we've created 2 key specialized areas where we now have as much as 6 or 7 programs across the board. So, for example, a lot of emphasis now on the digital economy. So we have a digital media program. We have a program looking at digital media and things like the internet, how to utilize all the, what we call 4th industrial revolution technologies. Those are going to be increasingly embedded in what we have on offer. And then the other side of the coin, we have what we call sustainable development programs. A lot of them focus on climate change related issues, but also on how do you create sustainable enterprises in key sectors. And another key area that we've put a lot of emphasis on for growth is on health. So we now have a public health and wellness BA that's going to be offered. And in the summer, we are also offering a program focused on public health and emerging diseases like COVID. I mean, COVID is not going to be the last of its type. We'll be living or coexisting with COVID for a long time. So we need to understand how to manage the protocols for dealing with these kinds of diseases or emerging diseases. These are all new growth areas, and they also involve significant opportunities for entrepreneurial development. And that's where we are pushing for this academic year and onwards.
The inquiry there on whether the South Louis Community College is going to continue with its continuing education program. Where does that stand right now?
Well, what we're doing, our continuing ed program has declined quite significantly. In fact, the enrollment or participation has dropped off by as much as 2/3. So we are rejigging that. In fact, we are rejigging it so that we are focusing more on what we call lifelong learning. And that's where the world of academia and tertiary education has shifted to. So it's really focused on building capacity for particularly those who are already in the working world or those who want a fast track into strong professional areas. And so we've repackaged some of what we have on offer for that focus. And then there's what we call TVET, technical and vocational training. And that's where we see significant growth opportunities as well. We've been having discussions with several institutions for growth in these areas, which includes everything from animation-related activities to some of the new areas in the creative industries. So that's another area we're pushing very heavily on. In fact, we're creating a program on creative industries and event management. So that's one of our new associate degree programs.
Thank you very much there, the principal for the South Louis Community College, Dr. Keith Nurse. Thank you for that. Sunita, we have a question coming in for you. What strides has Export St. Lucia made in exporting St. Lucian music prior to COVID, and what is the plan post-COVID?
Export St. Lucia has been focusing quite a bit on the creative industries and particularly on music in the past year or so. And what we've done, one of the things we've done is to really look at the branding of St. Lucia music and assisting the artists in looking at business, music as a business. So we've actually brought in persons like international DJ Steven, who has come in to mentor our musicians. He's put in quite a bit of time in doing that. We've had a lot of, we've brought in Bo Hinkson, for example, to assist with the business of doing, the business of music. So these are some of the things that we've done. One of the activities we've had actually on Friday, we had a virtual concert which was put up by St. Lucian artists, music artists. So we did that together with ECHO, FRC, and quite a few other partners. So we have been focusing a lot on St. Lucia music, on the creatives in general, because we've recognized that there's quite an appetite in the diaspora specifically for St. Lucian music. So the Denell segment is huge in Canada, Miami, New York. So Export St. Lucia has been doing quite a bit of work with those artists in terms of how do you brand. They're really brand ambassadors for St. Lucia, and we've been doing a lot of work with them on that. In the future, that will continue. That's something we've seen quite a bit of potential for that. And we know that St. Lucian youth are particularly creative. And that's one of the things Export St. Lucia really wants to pay attention to, is the creativity of the youth, and how do we export it out of St. Lucia, and how can they earn a real stable living from doing that, from engaging in creative activity.
Okay, we're coming to our closing moments. We go to the phone line though, and we want to say good evening to our caller. Thank you so much for calling in. What's your question or your comment? Hi, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost that caller there. Dr. Nurse, you still, the caller is online?
Yes.
Hello? Thank you so much for calling in. If you just lower the volume on your, okay, so, all right, we lost that caller there. Dr. Nurse, we have a question here. If there is a second wave of COVID-19, will these courses that you outlined, will they be online? How can we access online?
That's a good question. A significant share of all our courses have gone online from the last academic year. And we were operating, like everyone else, under what we call emergency remote teaching. So we have invested a lot. In fact, I was listening to Denell earlier, and he said that his company had prepared itself or positioned itself to manage COVID-19 and the crisis. In many respects, fortuitously, we were able to start investing in our e-learning program from the time I came on. So we really boosted the number of staff and facilities. And so in many respects, we have proven to be the best prepared, at least in the Eastern Caribbean, to manage this digital educational shift. And in fact, this e-symposium we hosted with GIS was super successful. We had over 10,000 people on YouTube, on Facebook, on Zoom, and that doesn't even include the number of people who patched in the local television station. So that was a huge success. But already our webinars were attracting 5,000 people and upwards, even as much as 11,000 people for the training that we were offering online on teacher education for e-learning. And so this is another area that we're expanding on during the summer and going forward. So for the next academic year, a significant share, and almost all our courses are going to be online, except for those that require a significant practical or lab-related or technical or clinical type activity. And that's quite an important share of what we offer. So it's going to be a mixed mode for some courses, but for many of the more established or standard courses, it's going to be offered online for the next academic year by and large.
Thank you so much there, the Principal for the South Louis Community College, Dr. Keith Nurse. Thank you for your participation. In our closing minutes, we want to give the panelists a chance now to give their closing thoughts. Over to Dave.
I think the discussions here tonight have shown the need to really drive innovation, the need for an incubator to really provide that business support for existing entrepreneurs and even potential entrepreneurs who really want to start business in St. Lucia. And in closing, I just want to encourage all the stakeholders out there who in some way, shape or form provide support for young entrepreneurs to really come together and make it happen. And in closing, I would like to leave that quote, "The best way," by Peter Drucker, and it reads, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." And I think the key agencies in St. Lucia who could really make it happen to work together and really strengthen the ecosystem and provide that platform for successful businesses in St. Lucia.
That's very good there. Sunita.
Just to invite all St. Lucians to really support what is done locally, our local businesses, because you cannot have a very good export product if you don't have a product that's doing very well locally. And that's one of the things we really want to reiterate. We want to also encourage private sector development. Your government can only do so much in terms of how much they can invest in your economy. What really drives your economy is the private sector. And we really want to encourage entrepreneurship. We really want to encourage injection of capital into the private sector to create those jobs, to ensure that our economy really rebounds from this coronavirus. And just to let our viewers know that Export St. Lucia is always available. We have never stopped working, and we're always there to assist our business clients, whether it's a good, whether it's a service, creatives, your music, your art, your photography, whatever it is, that Export St. Lucia is available to assist you to take that product out into the external market.
Florius, you're a young entrepreneur.
All right, so I have a message to all the people interested in entrepreneurship. If you have an idea, if you have a dream, if you have a product or service that you really want to grow, just start. That is the secret. All you have to do is just start and be persistent, never give up. The support, everything that you need will come to you. You will attract it, and you will continue to grow and develop your idea. Never give up on your dreams. I always say this, you only have to do 1% than you did yesterday. If you do 1% every single day of the year, at the end of the year, that is 365%, and that is exponential growth.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's such wise words and wonderful advice coming from someone who isn't just talking, but going out there and making it count. So he's the OECS 30 Under 30 and Caribbean Climate Innovation Center entrepreneur. That is Denell Florius. He has won the Prime Minister's Award for Innovation in Green Energy and has a dream to transition the Caribbean region to a sustainable, greener future through green technology innovation. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for joining us for this very important conversation. And to all of the young entrepreneurs out there, I say to you, dare to break barriers, dare to dream, because anything is possible. I am Lissa Joseph. See you next time.